Well, hello, Viva Birdos. JP Hill here, Jason Hill, and it is so good to join you again on another Thursday night here when we're recording. You'll see this on Saturday morning for another Viva Birdos podcast, VEB podcast here. And we've got Heather, new site manager, announced a couple weeks ago. Good to have you with us, Heather. And Miles Mikolas / Gabe Simmons is with us as well. And joining us as our special guest from St. Louis, Drew Silva, who has been writing about baseball and apparently reading over at Viva Birdos for a long time. Drew, it's so good to have you here with us today.
It's great to be here. Yeah, we spoiled all the good stuff in our little pre-recording chat, but yeah, I found Viva Birdos when I was probably like a sophomore in high school, and it was Larry Borowski and that era of the site. And I think it was like foundational in me wanting to dig in. All right, so we should go way back. I moved to St. Louis in 1996 from Washington, D.C. I grew up an Orioles fan. That was before the Nationals got there.
Okay.
And immediately the Cardinals were in the NLCS that year. And then Mark McGwire comes in 97, right? 98. Trade deadline 97, and so there's the McGwire years, and then there's Pujols, and like they've just been good since I've lived in this town, at least relevant. I think Derek Gould did a measurement of how many irrelevant games the Cardinals have played over the last 20 years, and it's like, it's a double-digit number, not a triple-digit number.
Yeah.
And so when I found that site in high school, which was like 2003-ish, like the Pujols era, and then the MV3 right after that, the 2004 World Series, like it shaped my desire to like dig into baseball analytics and dig into really good baseball writing. And that was like the beginning of the blogging era. And that was some of the best writing that you could find, what Larry Borowski and those guys were doing. And so, yeah, I mean, I have a long history. I guess I've been reading Viva Birdos for 20 years now, which makes me feel really old. But and I have Heather and Gabe and I have hung out on numerous times, and we don't have to tell all those stories, but it's been some fun nights with those two.
Yeah, I quickly learned. I kind of set this up, suggested it, and did not know that I was walking into, and also learned how much I've been missing out on. I have never gone out with Heather or Gabe. We were at a game together once, but that's about it. Now I feel extremely depressed and left out, guys. Thanks.
Oh, we'll have to bring those now that stuff was calming down from the pandemic and whatnot. We'll have to bring those back.
Yeah,
that's your responsibility, Heather.
Oh gosh,
Yes.
We'll just add it to the list.
As the site manager organizing these get-togethers, actually, that sounds like a pretty good. If you did that, that would be probably the best thing you could do. So
That sounds like fun. Yes.
Yeah. All right, Gabe, you got your eye on the basketball?
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking at.
It's
okay.
okay. Anything good happening? It's the first day of March Madness today, and
You're a Duke fan, yes. If you're not a Duke fan, no, I'm not a Duke fan. So, but
I was a Duke fan for 1 year when Jason Tatum went there, because he went to. Oh man, I'm wearing this sweatshirt too. He went to my high school, and my stepdad's the principal there, and so like I know his family a bit and stuff. And but I grew up a Maryland fan. Because I lived for the first 9-10 years of my life in the DC area, and they were a big rival back then before Maryland moved out of the ACC and joined the Big Ten. So I hate Duke too. I'm with you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump in a little bit. What I wanted to do, since we had Drew here with us, is kind of run through the National League a little bit. We've done our Cardinals off-season stuff, and we'll have our season preview episode with. I'm hoping we can get all the writers on the next podcast right before the season, kind of kicks off. But I thought it was a good time for us to talk about where the Cardinals sit in the National League and kind of talk about, what the rest of the National League contenders did. And frankly, a lot of them did a lot more than the Cardinals, and then the Dodgers didn't. So, there's plenty to talk about, but let's just start with the National League Central and the Cardinals. And I'm going to assume that we'll primarily want to focus on the Brewers as the competition for the Cardinals. And I'll just put that out there. Do we still consider the Brewers as competition for the Cardinals in the NL Central? I'm going to say yes, but what do you guys think?
I think yes, because the best outcome season for the Brewers could beat the Cardinals probably. Like if all their pitchers stay healthy all year and they get a couple of good performances from unexpected hitters, all of a sudden they might win like 95 games. But I don't know if that's super likely, but I would consider them competition for that reason alone. And I don't think that's true for like the Cubs. I don't think their best outcome, unless Cody Bellinger turns into an MVP again, but I'm not counting on that at all.
Yeah, the Brewers offseason was weird. Like they made some trades to get rid of some guys who were getting raises via contracts or arbitration. Hunter Renfroe, Colton Wong. Their upside is, I agree with Gabe, it's pretty high if Woodruff and Burns and Peralta are all healthy. That could be a three-headed monster, but it didn't happen last year. Peralta missed large chunks of the season, and I wouldn't trust him going into this year. And Burns and Woodruff have mostly had good health. If one of them goes down, that's like a very mediocre team all of a sudden. It's a weird roster offensively. Christian Yelich, that contract's a bit of a mess. I don't really trust the Brewers offensively. Of course, they could have two or three of the best pitchers in all of baseball. But I'm just surprised that they didn't get a little bit uncomfortable payroll wise instead of shedding some payroll. Like this would have been the time to strike. If they feel like they can't lock up Woodruff or Burns, either or, then this is their prime window, and they have not really capitalized on it. So they're a bit of a threat, but they need a lot of things to go right. They need a lot of luck on the health front. The Cubs, I mean, they spent a lot of money, and I guess good for them. The Ricketts, the ownership group there, kind of heard the cries of the fans that, why did we get rid of all these players that were from that World Series team? Like, and why are you running such a low payroll? And we sell out every game, even though, we've traditionally lost a lot. But to give that kind of contract to Dansby Swanson and his Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer and Cody Bellinger, are those like real answers to turning a rolling rebuild into a contending team? I don't really
4
think
years
so.
ago, they would have been,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I've asked this question to some friends. Would you be happy? And maybe happy is not the right word, because all right, I'll just pose it. Would you be happy if the Cardinals gave Dansby Swanson the contract that the Cubs gave him?
No.
We're all, for those of you that aren't watching and are listening, we all shook our head.
I'm like, let's Google what that is exactly.
It's a lot of money for a player who's stellar defensively, and hit some homers last year, like showed an elevation and power, but 7 years, 177 million is what it was. And
Okay.
I think some of his counting stats were, the result of being in a really good, really deep lineup that turned over a lot, and he had a lot of chances with runners in scoring position. And I know it's kind of like an old, baseball trope, but he got pitched to more because he's surrounded by studs in that Braves lineup.
Yeah.
And I just think he's a really easy guy to pitch around now that he's in that Cubs lineup. If Mancini is as bad as he was down the stretch with the Astros, if Hosmer's just Hosmer, and if Bellinger is like somewhere in between what he was in his prime years with the Dodgers and what he was in his final year with the Dodgers, like that lineup is not very scary. And they had some really good pitching down the stretch. It was a top 5 starting rotation for the final 2 months of the season by ERA.
Huh.
But you could punch holes in like all of those guys.
Yeah.
I don't believe in many of them. I think Marcus Stroman is good. Jameson Taillon's interesting, but in general, it's a pretty shallow roster, and I don't really see them as contenders. Maybe they fight to get to 500, but I don't see them challenging to win the NL Central.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Just to put that in context a little bit, I mean, just picking fan graphs is kind of my go-to for projected standings, and there's other sites you can use, but Cardinals not no, I'm sorry. Let me scroll over to
Oda?
where it actually is. Cardinals 86 wins projected. I think that's on the low side. Brewers 84. That's fair. Cubs 75. I would take the over on the Cubs on that one. I think 75 to 83, at the peak for them. And the Brewers could sneak up around 88, 90, but they've got the potential to win 70 games too if they have a couple injuries. So
I was just pulling up DraftKings win totals, and they have the Cardinals at 88.5. That's
yeah.
Is that what it is like around sports books? That seems really high to me. I like the Cardinals, kind of. I feel like that rotation is a house of cards, no pun intended. And I guess I said that last year, and they got by with it and made some smart additions along the way, and had pretty good luck health wise outside of Steven Matz and Jack Flaherty. But I don't know, counting on that group they have right now going into the year, I feel like it's dangerous. I think the lineup could be special, and the defense is awesome, and they play in a big ballpark, which works for the rotation that pitches to contact. It's a fine roster. And it's just like a really good business model that the Cardinals have. It's going to be a fine team, and it's probably going to win the NL Central. I thought the Brewers should get a little uncomfortable payroll wise right now. I wish the Cardinals had done that last year. If you're going to send out Pujols and Molina, with like this big retirement tour, why not get a little crazy with the payroll? And, they got Wilson Contreras over the winter, and that's about it. I wish they would have done a little more, but I'm a greedy Cardinals fan. I acknowledge that, like, we're very spoiled. But I think, and hey, the Bally Sports Midwest stuff could factor into all this. It's a good excuse, at least, if they want to say that's why we couldn't have raised
if they're
payroll.
looking for an excuse, they have one, and they are always seeming to look for an excuse not to spend more. So
They spend, but they'd never get like really uncomfortable, like even just on like a 1 or 2 year deal. And I know Jose Quintana now like had a lesion on his ribs, and he's probably done for the year after signing with the Mets. But I was so confused why the Cardinals wouldn't give him that 2-year, $26 million contract. Like, he was perfect for Busch Stadium. Great after they acquired him. Great in that playoff game, which I still don't know why he was removed so early. But anyway, let's stop talking about last year.
yeah.
I was just going to say, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, which you kind of already answered. I was like, who would you have wished that they had gone after? But Quintana, is there anyone else besides that?
I was going to say, why not Carlos Rodon, but he's hurt now too.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of pitchers. They just always, I thought they should have gotten like a kind of a big name starter.
That's what I was hoping for.
I wish that they had kind of waded into the free agent shortstop waters last offseason and this past offseason, because there were 10 guys that were kind of franchise changing players. I thought Trey Turner would have looked great wearing the birds on the bat, but the Cardinals, they don't do that. And hey, they have a lot of answers at shortstop, and maybe Mason Wynn is going to be the long-term answer at shortstop. He has been super impressive, and I didn't know he was as good of a hitter as he's turned into. Like, he was a pitcher at one point. They kind of drafted him as a two-way player, didn't they? Like, there was talk of that initially.
Yeah, he was just
because
good. That's a shortstop, really. And a hitter.
he's throwing 99 miles an hour, like off his back foot. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So maybe they were smart to not do. I don't like when people criticize Mozeliak as much, because I don't think he's making the decisions about the money. Like, right, that's a Bill DeWitt decision. And I think given the business plan, the numbers that he's given that he can spend each year, I think he does a pretty fantastic job.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like, you talk about Rodon, you even talk about Quintana. I wonder, especially when he looks at his budget sheet and what he has, and then, and I don't know how to say this, maybe, knowing that Bill DeWitt is going to want Wainwright back. At that point, I know Mozeliak can count beyond 5, but your traditional rotation is 5 men. You've got 4 starters already with Matz, Montgomery, Mikolas, Flaherty, you expect to be somewhere, towards the top of that rotation, you hope. And then you start, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, 5 is Wainwright. And then how are you going to pay a 6th or a 7th with our budget restrictions? I mean, I'm with you, Drew. I absolutely would have. And we talked about this before the show. I'm a little heartless. I probably would have let Wainwright and his now currently 87 mile per hour fastball, maybe would have let that walk.
I'm with you.
But then, Quintana's hurt and Rodon's hurt, and I would really look like a fool right now if I had put all my eggs into those baskets. And Mozeliak doesn't put his eggs into one basket. He spreads it around.
And I also think the Cardinals are, this is a convenient thing for them to think, but they're a lot higher on Andre Plante, Connor
They are.
Thomas, Dakota Hudson. Like they like their depth. I don't like Dakota Hudson. Don't worry. I'm not going to start defending Dakota Hudson. But he's fine for what he is.
Famous Dakota Hudson proponent, Gabe.
Yeah.
Hey, the pitch clock should make him bearable to watch. That was the worst part of watching pitch.
I feel like Gabe is one of the harshest Dakota Hudson, anti-Dakota Hudson people I've met.
There are a lot of us out there. Don't worry. I'm not alone on this.
I'm like, I'll put 1 foot into that Dakota Hudson anti fan club. I mean, I get
The
like
opposite of fan
he's
club.
yeah, he's a cost controlled arm that, the first 2 years, if you want to combine 2020, like he 8 innings at a good ERA. Like you could look at the metrics and be like, this guy is not as good as that ERA would tell you. And I mean, it kind of worked when he pitched with those sinkers and like drew a lot of soft contact and made the defense work. But I feel like he's lost that. He's not that pitcher anymore. And he's not good enough to like miss bats with a high fastball. Like major league hitters will just crush that. Even at Busch Stadium, they'll hit homers.
I think a huge percentage of it too is how slow of a worker he is. That's the thing too. It's like if you're gonna be slow and then not get results, that's really gonna frustrate people. Like either be fast and then be fast and bad, or
supposedly
maybe
stuff is Tommy John stuff, by the way. Like if the Stuff Plus stuff or whatever, those new stats from, I don't know if it's Say or something. But supposedly stuff is back to what it was. So that's not necessarily suggesting he's going to be good, because his advanced metrics were pretty poor even when he was good.
Yeah.
But
and not to make this the Dakota Hudson episode that no one wants, but I wouldn't say that I was a Hudson supporter. I found myself early being sort of a Hudson defender, because in the minors he really didn't walk that many guys. He controlled his walks, and I kept saying, well, he's still pretty young. Maybe he can learn a little better, control with a lot of the movement that he has, and he just hadn't done it. And if he had that walk rate, down, 1.75 to 2.5 walks per 9, he would be an effective starter, but he can't. So, if you can't, you can't. And I feel like, command control is one of the hardest things to learn, and he hasn't learned it. And that pretty much has, I'm on the truther side of it now, Dakota Hudson truther. That
I've come back around.
Come back around. But he's also pretty interchangeable. I think they've got 5 or 6 guys that you could throw any one of them at the back of the rotation and feel like, oh yeah, we'll be fine for a couple months until the next old lefty hits the trade market, and then we'll trade for that guy and off we'll go.
That is the thing. Like you've always got to factor in that the Cardinals are going to get a starter or two at the trade deadline, and they'll be, if they have a poor first half, they'll still be within a few games of first place, or maybe like 5 games out or something. That would be like a bad first half, a really bad first half, and then they'll go get a starter to stabilize the rotation, and they'll make the playoffs, and that'll be it. But I mean, this lineup, I think we're talking so negatively about elements of the Cardinals. Like this lineup could be really special. I mean, like I do fantasy analysis a lot, and I think Tommy Edmonds being drafted too early, because people are assuming that he's going to be the leadoff man. I like the fact that they have real legit leadoff men now in Brendan
Yeah.
Donovan and Lars Nootbaar. That's huge because you don't want that 315 OBP at the top, even though he's fast, Edmund. And then you go from there, and it's just like these could be some really impressive bats. I mean, you've got 2 MVP candidates in Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. Tyler O'Neill, if he's healthy, could be a huge bounce back guy. I mean, he got down ballot MVP votes not too long ago. Wilson Contreras, I think the first 3 years of that deal will be really good. I think he's going to be a really nice fit. And then, I mean, we'll see what happens with Jordan Walker. Dylan Carlson's showing better exit velocity this spring. There were times when I watched him last year and I was like, he's just like moving too slowly at the plate. Like he's like moving too deliberately, and he's got like beautiful form, but you need to like move your hips, man. And I'm like no baseball scout, but it was just obvious that he was not swinging the bat hard enough and not swinging with much confidence. So maybe you get something out of him. I really like this offense. And Mason Wynn could come up, and whenever Jordan Walker arrives, like it could be top to bottom really, really good.
Yeah.
It was a top 5 offense last year too. Like people kind of gloss over that. I think it could be a top 5 offense again, maybe even like push to be top 4, top 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
It's kind of crazy that like if you look at our lineup, it's either going to be Dylan Carlson or Jordan Walker on the outside looking in, and
Yeah.
Yepes, and depending on how high you are on them, Alec Burleson. None of those guys have spots, and I think I'm forgetting the name. I guess Nolan Gorman, I'm putting in as a DH. So, but
Yeah, I forgot about Gorman. Like people,
You're right.
I feel like people have kind of given up on him. He's 22 years old and he hit 30 plus homers between AAA and the majors last year. There's like, look, if you're looking at Cardinals offenses from the past, there are so many years where it's like, oh, why is this guy in the lineup? And like Gabe said, there are guys where you're like, I can't believe they're on the outside looking in right now. So I don't know. I think the lineup is constructed really well, and I'm excited about that. And again, I just wish they would have gotten a little uncomfortable for some kind of starting pitcher. I feel like they had something in the works. I think Mozeliak told Nolan Arenado that when he flew out to go visit him before Arenado did not opt out, which probably lost him about $100 million.
Yeah. Well, Mozeliak did say, I mean, very specifically said that there were some moves that didn't work. And I've never been able to figure out what that was. I assumed it was maybe Cody Bellinger. Like that was the only really, but that doesn't make any sense. Like, you know,
Murphy.
Just with the way the timing worked out, I'm like, was he talking about Bellinger? I mean, but or it's just, I don't know what he was working on, but I agree. I think there was something there.
I think they were intending to trade for Sean Murphy, and then the Athletics asked for twice
Yeah,
the value.
this is secondary to that. I mean, that's definitely true, but
Yeah.
that's not really what he was referencing because
Oh,
he
no,
said,
yeah,
yeah,
But but they need to address the catcher, and then once they address the catcher, then they would maybe spend the money. And Sean Murphy was only making like $4 or $5 million.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think there was a domino thing that was supposed to happen that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it could have been Swanson, but I really don't think it was. I
No.
know they checked up on him, but I think they checked up on him back when the A's were like shifting over and demanding Brendan Donovan, another name we didn't mention,
And
Brendan
Newbar.
Donovan, in a trade, and Nolan Gordon. When those two were kind of both looking at maybe going out, it was like, well, we're gonna have to get a shortstop or somebody, and then move Edmund back over. And yeah, I think that was more of a reaction than it was the plan.
Yeah.
I wonder if they were in on any of the shortstops, like beyond. I don't even think they were in on Dansby Swanson. I think they were just thrown into that mix because it's easy to say, oh, the Cardinals are in this mix. But I don't know. There were like the Cardinals are pretty good at being tight-lipped, right? So we're just kind of like, what is it, Charlie and Always Sunny in Philadelphia, trying to connect dots that we have no idea on. But I feel like there was something that was supposed to happen this offseason that did not happen. And maybe it's for the best that they didn't do a panic move. Like I think you could call Jason Hayward's contract a panic move. Dexter Fowler was a panic move. When Giancarlo Stanton didn't want to come to St. Louis. Ozuna, that trade was kind of a panic move because they didn't think Yelich was going to be available. And maybe we're happy now that they didn't wind up getting Yelich. But I feel like maybe Mosaic was like, all right, we're not going to like rush into something just because that didn't work out.
Yeah.
Just
Well, let's
theories.
move on. That was fascinating. Let's move on though to the rest of the NL. Let's go to the NL East because that division is something with the Braves and the Mets and the Phillies all there. And we'll just start with you, Drew. What do you think about the NL East? What are we looking at there?
I mean, it stinks that Edwin Diaz got hurt in Puerto Rico celebration. I'm sure you guys saw that. He ruptured a full tear of his patellar tendon, celebrating Puerto Rico's win over the Dominican Republic. He's likely out for the year. It's going to be 6 to 8 months. But again, I mean, that's a closer. That team is stacked. The Braves are stacked. The Phillies are pretty stacked. I could see some problems with their pitching if it's, if it's Nolan and Wheeler don't repeat what they did last year, which, is possible. Ranger Suarez has already had some arm issues this spring. Their rotation could get an Andrew Painter, who's like their big 19-year-old pitching prospect, the top pitching prospect in all of baseball. He's probably not gonna throw this year because he messed up his elbow in camp. So their depth is a little lacking on the pitching front. I wouldn't know how to guess on who wins this division. It's probably going to be like last year where it comes down to the final few days and the Braves get it done because they're just so well run. I look at some of those pre-arbitration contract extensions and even after arbitration contract extensions that they've signed their players to. It's an unbelievable model. I don't know how Alex Anthopoulos has convinced these players to accept those kind of deals. But they're just really well run and they're set up for the next decade to be a great team. I mean, they just optioned Ian Anderson to AAA the other day, and they're going to put, I think, Jared Schuster into that number 5 spot. Like they pump out pitchers, they pump out position players. I feel like the Braves are going to upset a lot of Mets fans again this year. And the Phillies will be lurking. Like that's a really talented team. It's a little bit shallow, probably. Like it's very top heavy. And even adding Trey Turner, I think it's still top heavy. But their top heavy talent is incredible. And that's all it takes to win a wild card series. We saw that last year. A best of 3. All you really need is 2 pitchers and 4 good bats. And they certainly have that.
Yeah. We used to be, not that this hasn't changed a lot, but we used to talk about how jealous we were of the Dodgers, both of their payroll and the way they operate. And now the last year and a half, I've been looking at the Braves and the Braves are actually probably a closer model of what the Cardinals could do. The Dodgers, their payroll was just so much but the Braves have a higher payroll, but the way that they've locked up their young players and built from within and signed the smart contracts, it's almost like the Cardinals are taking the opposite approach where they've been afraid to sign anyone to a arbitration buyout since Paul DeYoung. And whether that's reactionary or intentional or probably has nothing to do with DeYoung. I hate to even bring him up, in that conversation, but Mosaic hasn't done it yet. Whereas the Braves are locking everyone up forever and winning a lot of games and doing it. I'll admit I'm pretty jealous of the way the Braves operate right now.
I think any other fan of any other team listening to this podcast would be like, well, I'm jealous of the Cardinals.
Yeah.
But I know I hear what you're saying. And like culture gets overused in sports, but it seems like they've really built something there where players buy in and they want to be there.
Yeah.
Michael Harris II, Ronald Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies, even Matt Olson, like right when they acquired him, they signed up to a team-friendly deal somehow.
Yeah, right.
It's unbelievable what they're doing.
Yeah.
I do wonder how some of those long-term deals end up working out like at the end of the deal, because they're already under team control for like 6 years for most of the deals. Obviously something crazy, Ozzie Albies, which still frustrates the hell out of me. I don't know what kind of what's he put in there? Like, did they put a gun to his head? Like, I don't understand that.
Maybe that's the secret.
Right.
But yeah, and then
we have guns in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Cut that out.
But I think, it's definitely Braves and Mets. And I'm not as high on the Phillies personally. I know they made it to the World Series, but I think they're clearly a tier below them. And to the benefit of the Cardinals, only one of those teams can win the division. So all the Cardinals need to do is be better than whoever wins the West, which would probably be the Dodgers. But they're way less impressive than they've been in years.
Yeah.
So now's, I mean, that's to your point, Drew, sort of to why they should have maybe spent some money, because they could have capitalized on how the West is just not quite as strong as it usually is. And they could have
Yeah.
gotten the second division and skipped the wild card game, which is really the only way you could help improve your postseason odds to such an extreme. Because you can't really like get one player that will guarantee you win, but you can skip a postseason series.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to like skip over to the West on you guys, but like I was updating the Giants depth charts for RotoWire today. That's like such a weird team. I think they're going to be terrible this year. Like their offense is bad, and I know that they've surprised. Like they won the NL West in 2021. They won a franchise record 107 games during the regular season, but and some of those guys are still there, but maybe that's a problem that some of those guys are still there, like Brandon Crawford. And I don't know. I think that team is a mess. The Padres are really talented. I wonder if it's another year of them kind of being frustrating and the Dodgers kind of just being steady and good, even though they didn't do like anything this offseason. I mean, they're so deep. They didn't really have to do anything.
Yeah.
The Diamondbacks are interesting. I'm sorry, I'm getting into the NL West if you want to guide it somewhere. I think the Diamondbacks are kind of interesting as like a wild card team.
Yeah, we can go. Yeah, we can jump to the West, and then we can jump back to standings for both the East and the West. That's fine. Yeah, yeah. The Padres, to me, and I want to hit on the Giants too for a minute. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to the Giants, but let's talk Padres. The Padres, to me, I wonder if they're a little bit. I don't know that this is the right way to say it, but almost fool's gold because there's depth there. There's really good players, but I could see it falling apart. Not that they're going to be terrible. But Darvish, Snell, Musgrove, Walker,
Seth Lugo, Blake Snell.
yeah, right. I mean, like that could get messy fast if some
everything goes right. Yeah, I mean, if a lot of things go right, it could be the best team in baseball.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But their floor is.
They're not I said they're not a deep team at all. That's a big issue with the Padres. If their stars go down, like they traded away all their depth for trades last year. So if anybody gets injured, they might be in trouble. Like Tatis missing the first 30 games. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, he comes back April 20th. And even
back as the same player.
I'm still a little bit nervous about what he's going to be over the course of that deal that they gave him. And Juan Soto has an incredible plate approach, and he's already won a World Series at a young age. But I don't know if he's like a driver for a team. You saw it kind of down the stretch last year. Like he gets on base a ton, but he's not like a raw power hitter, which is fine. He should stay the way that he is because it's great what he does, and he's going to go down as perhaps one of the greatest all-around hitters of all time. But I think you can punch holes in that team. I don't know if the Xander Bogaerts deal was like super smart. I like Xander Bogaerts. If the Cardinals were going to go after a shortstop, I probably would have put it Trey Turner number 1, Bogaerts number 2. I think he's a really smart guy. He speaks like 8 languages. But I don't know if he's like a huge needle mover for the size of the contract that they gave him. And then like I don't know, they signed Nelson Cruz. Matt Carpenter.
I was just thinking that.
Trent Grisham was terrible last year. I think it's a really talented team, and I'll say like if everything goes right, it could be the best team in baseball. But I feel like we've been down this road with them for the past few years, and they're in for a lot of disappointment if it doesn't work out.
So do we like the Dodgers better?
Yeah.
I mean, almost no one has the Dodgers ahead of the Padres just because of the glamour factor. But I mean, the Dodgers are the Dodgers until they're not. It's been my approach to it. And they just
I don't like projected standings, honestly. Yeah.
That and the Dodgers.
I mean, like
going to add to their roster throughout the year. I mean, by the trade. I imagine they're not just going to stand pat all year and stick with the guys they got. They actually have the pieces that they could trade to get whatever they need. They can
Yeah.
they can do the Cardinals model, basically adjust on the fly if something isn't quite working.
And I think like I mean Dustin May is back. He is so nasty. I'm a bit worried about his workload. They have so much pitching depth. Like they have unbelievable dudes coming through that system. Bobby Miller, they're loaded with depth that they can trade away from or bring those guys up. They're pretty aggressive with their call ups. Like they've already installed Miguel Vargas as their everyday second baseman, and he's a super talent. I think Will Smith is the best catcher in baseball, maybe next to kind of 1A, 1B with Adley Rutschman. We'll see what Rutschman does as a sophomore, but he was so impressive last year for the Orioles. Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, like the list goes on. It's weird that like one of their primary offensive moves was JD Martinez. But maybe they can like unlock something to get another good year or two out of him. Would that shock you at all? Like if he all of a sudden drives in 100 runs with 30 plus dingers, like I don't think it would shock me at all.
No, not a bit.
Oh, so he's my utility player in fantasy.
Not a bad guy to plug into that spot.
Yeah. Let's look over the Giants then. I didn't even have them up whenever we started this, but yeah, the Giants definitely seem like a team that
could be terrible.
Could be terrible. I mean, it's just one of these years is just going to kind of fall apart on them, right? I mean, this could definitely be that year.
Who is David DeLaw?
He's their starting everyday third baseman. He was like
Sabol?
Bad with the Angels. Yeah. Blake
Who are
Sable.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually really like the Michael Conforto deal. It was like 1 year. It was a lot of money. I think it was 1 year, 17 or 18.5. It was comparable to the Cody Bellinger contract. And I thought the Cardinals should have done that to just put him at DH. Like he had shoulder surgery. Yeah. That's why he missed all of 2022. But he was like a premier power slugger with the Mets for a long time. I thought that would have made sense for the Cardinals to get a little uncomfortable, but a 1 year deal, like, I'm sorry that I keep bringing it back to the Cardinals for everything, but this is a Cardinals podcast. So
yeah, right. Yeah, that's what we all do.
But yeah, I mean, like, Lamont Wade, Tyro Estrada, Jock Peterson, Brandon Crawford, David VR, Mike Yastrzemski, who had one nice year. Joey Bart has been a letdown. I don't know. I mean, Logan Webb's awesome. I wish the Cardinals could acquire him, but other than that, I think the rotation is pretty underwhelming. Sean Manaea with like a lingering shoulder issue. I love Gabe Kapler. He like follows me on Twitter and we've DM'd, and he's handsome. But I think the Giants are in for a bad year.
Yeah.
And I think the Diamondbacks are going to be the third team in that division, and if everything goes right for them, like if you look at that roster, it's pretty interesting. And what they have going with some of their young players, they just locked up Corbin Carroll to a long-term deal. He's on many places the number one position prospect in all of baseball, and he already has some major league experience under his belt. Jake McCarthy is kind of an underrated guy that can hit in the middle of their order. Christian Walker had a surprisingly good power season last year. If Ketel Marte is healthy, he's going to be really good. Like Alec Thomas, they traded for Lourdes Gurriel. Josh Rojas put up insane numbers at AAA and is finally kind of established himself in the majors. And then the rotation's pretty interesting too. Zach Gallen.
Yeah.
Sorry. But they're not relying on Madison Bumgarner to be their ace anymore. And they have a really good pitching prospect named Brandon Pfaadt, who's probably going to come up at some point this year, maybe even like crack the opening day rotation. That's a really interesting team if you're looking for like a long shot wild card play. I don't think they're going to challenge the Dodgers or Padres, but they're interesting.
And you didn't mention the catcher they just traded for, the huge prospect, Gabriel Moreno.
Yeah.
Gabriel Moreno.
He's supposed to be really good. I was very unexpected trade when they traded Dalton Varsho for. I thought that was a really good trade for the Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
I agree. I think Varsho is a little bit overrated.
I agree.
I mean, his career OBP, and it's early, but it's not promising, like that plate approach. And he's a really popular name in fantasy. Like he'll go top 100 because he steals bases and he's eligible at catcher. But I think Varsho has not really shown me anything that he's like a superstar kind of talent.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, once he starts
Diamondbacks
qualifying
seem like the kind of team that will, like, I mean, we know some names, not the names even you should know. Kelly, Evan Longoria is still around, some stuff like that. but
Don't dig too deep, Jason.
yeah, it's too bad that that they have the Padres and the Dodgers. Otherwise, we might be kind of talking about them a little bit more, and probably they deserve it too, because I agree with you, Gabe and Drew. They've made some smart under the radar moves, and they're a team on the rise. And the Padres keep going all in here. They could find themselves in trouble, and the Diamondbacks have a way up here in the next few years.
Yeah, they're building something, and I love that Corbin Carroll contract. I wouldn't be surprised if they sign Alec Thomas to that kind of deal too. They've got something going, and it is a tough division to contend in, because you've got the Dodgers and Padres spending like crazy, and it's hard to keep up with that. But if they keep doing it, the right way, and maybe this year, probably more toward next year and the year after that, they could throw some punches with those two teams.
Yeah. So let's put this all in context, because we are a Cardinals centered, as you just said, Cardinals centered. In this group of teams, let's say from the Giants on the bottom of maybe 500 teams, with the Cubs maybe, all the way up to the Braves, who I'm going to put at the top. Where are we putting the Cardinals in that list?
Man, should we just power rank the NL teams right now?
We might as well.
I was gonna say, I think I would do like a tier thing more than like rank them specifically.
Yeah.
And we're on the same
No,
tier. Go ahead.
That's cheating, Gabe. Man, I'm gonna put the Dodgers. I'm gonna put the Dodgers number one. And I know they didn't have a flashy offseason. It's because they didn't really have to.
Yeah.
I'll go. I think Braves too.
Braves is for me, but
yeah.
Mets.
Okay, let's just do this, Drew. Okay, your top five, Drew. Give me your top five.
Dodgers, Braves, Mets, Padres, Phillies, Cardinals are 6.
wow.
Cardinals are 6.
All right.
I got yelled at a lot on the
Central.
site for saying the Cardinals were 5th or 6th. So everyone heard that Drew Silva agrees with me. So, or at least did. I'm actually going to have them up a little bit higher than Drew right now, but that's okay.
Because I'm
Heather.
they're first in the Central, and that's pretty much all that matters.
Yeah.
That's all they need. Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I guess
Are you Heather DeWitt?
Yes, exactly. How did you know?
All right, who you got? Who's your
Nice.
top? Who's your top contenders, Heather?
Okay. Let me think. Now, pressure's on. I like the Braves. I like the Dodgers. Do I want to do? Okay. I'm gonna do the Cardinals third.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm gonna do Braves, Dodgers, Cardinals, Mets, Phillies.
Padres are. I could see
Pod-
maybe the Cardinals leapfrogging the Padres, but on paper, I think it's a hard case to make. But
That's the
I
thing is
respect
like
your list.
I respect you. Thank you. Because that's the thing is like you can look at like this teams as they are constructed and like what they should be, but also it's hard to look at like because a lot of these teams didn't change that much from last year, I feel like, and there's not really any teams that are going to threaten their place this year. So with the exception of maybe the Padres, because they added one. That happened this offseason, didn't it?
Last trade deadline, they added Xander Bogaerts.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's what it
Michael
was.
Bogarts in
I
the,
was
in the
like,
season, and yeah, Soto at the trade deadline. Mhm.
so I thought when we were talking about it, I'm like, man, did that just happen? That felt like a year ago. Well, it's because
Yeah.
it did happen a year ago. Okay, good. I'm not crazy. So yeah, so like they added Xander Bogart. So like a lot of these teams I don't feel like changed that much. And so I feel like maybe it should be very similar to last year with like a little bit of moving around with the top teams. So I don't know.
No, I mean that's like kind of the safe play.
Yeah.
Like no, the way that I ranked them is the safe play. Just look at the kind of the standings from last year. Things are
Yeah.
going to change. Like
Mhm.
I mean, we've already seen a lot of big time injuries in camp in the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah.
And the Mets are interesting. Like they just kind of exchanged Jacob deGrom for Justin Verlander. We'll see how that works out. I feel like they're gonna. I mean, they had Carlos Correa signed and then had his medicals looked at by 8 doctors and gave up on that. That's kind of concerning. They got this guy Kodai Senga from Japan, who's
Yeah.
super interesting. Like throws 98 with, I think he calls it a ghost fork. This wicked out pitch, and he had trouble like initially adjusting to the major league mound, and the ball feels different than what they have in Japan. But now that he's locked in, like that guy has nasty stuff. It's hard to know how some of those Japanese pitchers are going to work out, but we've seen it with plenty that it can.
Yeah.
So he's really interesting in that rotation as well.
Who you got? Who's your top 5 there, Gabe?
Do it, Gabe.
It's Braves 1 for sure, and then Mets 2 for me. And I agree with Heather. I got to put the Cardinals 3 as the rosters are currently constructed. I find it hard to look at the Dodgers, who lost Trey Turner and they lost Gavin Lux for the full season. Walker Buehler, I don't know how much is he missing the entire year.
Yeah.
And I'm not convinced about their starting pitching depth as you are, because right now their 5th starter on roster resources listed as Ryan Pepito. I don't know who the hell that is. And they got like 2 or 3 top 100 prospects in AAA who have pitched like 4 games. And we know from experience, sometimes it takes a while for starting pitchers who are huge prospects to adjust to the major leagues. So there's no guarantee that they will help the team that much this year. Bobby Miller, he's started like 4 games in AAA. So I don't know. I don't think their starting pitching depth is there. And then if anybody else gets hurt, Gonsolin has an ankle thing right now. I don't know if he's supposed to be ready.
Yeah. It's just a sprain. He'll be in there by mid-April. And he was really, really good last year.
Yeah.
I know what. Yeah, Ryan Pepio is actually kind of interesting to me too. I think they have so much pitching, but
I don't know. I think I'll take the Cardinals pitching depth. I will put that keyword in.
No,
depth.
Gabe, this is
I
a
will not
terrible
take
take.
Hey, I'm all in on Connor Thomas learning the cutter, man. I think that, and then hopefully Matthew Liberatore can throw the fastball a little harder or something. We'll see.
He is. This spring, he is. His fastball velocity on average is quite a bit up from what we saw. The inconsistency last season isn't there so far. But we said that a bit. I mean, it comes and goes for Liberatore.
Yeah.
So
The thing
You're talking about, yeah. I haven't really paid attention to Liberatore recently. You're optimistic about him, Jason? I hope so.
Well, I mean, first of all, even having a bad fastball, no one's fastball is that bad from what we saw last year. Like he would throw 3 or 4 shutout innings and then like things would blow up. And that just doesn't happen over the course of a season. Things would even out. And we know he's capable of throwing 95 to 96, but routinely. And you would see those velocities start to dip to 94, 93, 92. And we all know from Flaherty and others, you start seeing that fastball dip, and it just the ERA, FIP just exponentially increases. So I'm not optimistic about him being like an impact starter, but along with Palante, Connor Thomas a little bit, some of these other guys, Woodford, Hudson, can they be above replacement level injury replacement? Yeah, I think so.
They just have a lot of arms to throw. The problem is where my optimism comes into play, because they've got, we said, Dakota Hudson, Jake Woodford, Palante, Connor Thomas, Matthew Liberatore, potentially Gordon Graceffo, and then long pie in the sky, Michael McGree. But I'm not going to pretend that he's. But I don't know. I just think they got. And if you look at the experience of the guys that the Dodgers may rely on, most of them just got to AAA or like 26 years old. I got like 3 starters on the 40-man roster, all 26. It's not a good sign if they're not projected to be in the majors. Whereas the Cardinals have Connor Thomas has been in AAA for like 3 years. Libertor's been in AAA or the majors for 2 years. Shoot. Jake Woodford's been in the majors or AAA for 3 years. I mean, they just got a lot of guys who are basically ready to take that next step, whereas you don't have to hope as much, in my opinion, anyway. And also they don't have as high of a bar to clear if somebody gets hurt. That's the benefit of having an average-ish set of 5 starters, is that if anybody gets hurt, it's not a huge burden to replace them and still maintain the same level with this offense and defense and base running.
You're right about, and yeah, the defense and the ballpark I think are huge factors, and maybe why they didn't feel like they needed to get uncomfortable with a top name starting pitcher. I bet they explored some trades to figure that out, but they didn't want to give up Donovan or Newbar, and I kind of understand that. Like cost controlled guys who have showed real promise. Man, Donovan, like, what did he have, a 394 on base percentage last year, and he's flashing power this spring. He kind of came out of nowhere for me, and I'm like a hardcore Cardinals fan. I think he might be like a dude, like a dude. Like a real good player. And you guys have made me in this conversation a little more optimistic about their pitching situation. So I don't know.
Well,
I'm more excited for the season after this podcast than I was coming into it. So that's good.
And I think too, like talking about the defense and the ballpark, any one of these guys that we're naming on any of these other teams could step in and do what Jake Woodford does, right? But it seems like with the Cardinals, if you lose, let's say you lose, well, I've got a lot of hopes on Montgomery. So let's say you lose Matz or Mikolas for a long period of time. Well, would it surprise anyone if Andre Palante steps in and has a league average, 100 innings? It wouldn't surprise me. And just because, and then especially from an ER, maybe his FIP is higher. But if he had an ERA of 3.5, I could see that because of the defense in the ballpark. And like I said, any of these other guys could do it on any of these other teams if they were on the Cardinals. But the Cardinals just seem to always get 2 or 3 guys that can come up and give you good innings, and they kind of suck by Eno Sarris's stats, but they do. So there it is.
And I'm with you on Montgomery too. We haven't really talked about him, but and I know that the second month of his experience with the Cardinals was not as good as the first month, but that's a perfectly set up guy for the defense and the ballpark.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he said it right when he came over from the Yankees. I can trust my stuff more. I can throw my 4-seam fastball here because I'm not worried about the short porches. And I don't think that was just bluster. I think that's a real change to his approach. You saw it in the numbers. I think he's going to have a huge first full year. Like I was thinking about like putting a little cash on him to be the ERA leader in the National League. Like I think he's going to have that kind of year.
Oh wow, that'd be awesome.
I mean, I can see it.
They need that because
because you're not even saying that he's going to be like some tremendous pitcher. You're just ERA leader because of the ballpark and I will say I got to go back and look at the number. No, I need to look at the numbers before I say it publicly because I think it shifted. Because there was a while there where Bush was playing last season as a mid ground to hitter's park, but I think that dropped back by the end of the season.
I think that was
just a good thing anyway.
Pools.
It was when Goldschmidt and Pools and Arenado were like all clicking at once. I think it's an extreme pitcher's park, and it will continue to be that unless they make changes to it. And the way they've built up Ballpark Village, like if you've been there, there's not very good airflow. It is stagnant in the heat. It's brutal. As a sweaty guy, as Gabe and Heather know, like I just die out there. And I think that's, and the dimensions are already like they set it up to be fair, and then I think as they built around it, it became an extreme pitcher's park. Like it's a top 2 pitcher's park in the majors. And maybe some of that has to do with they've had really good defense, like since they opened it, and they've had pretty good pitchers since they opened it. And, like you always got to consider that when people say, oh, this is a great hitter's park. Well, who's hitting there? on,
Yeah.
you know, most nights, most days. But I think Bush, like if you put an average team in there, the pitchers' ERAs would still be really good.
Yeah. I'm staring, for those of you that are watching, I'm staring up at my TV up on the screen. I've got a baseball savant. I was going to say too that I've got a lot of hope on Flaherty this season, but I wanted to check. He pitched today, and I wanted to check his fastball velocities because they've been a little bit down. But one of the weird things that's happening in the spring with the Statcast stuff is that they're not registering Flaherty's a distinction between his four-seam fastballs and his sinkers. And so you're going to have a velocity difference between those two pitches, but they're just registering all of them as four-seam fastballs. So it's really hard to tell which is a sinker and which is a four-seamer, except that there's like a 3 mile per hour drop in velocity. So his velocity overall was down again. And just glancing through it, I'm having a harder time this time because of more pitches thrown, telling the difference between what was a two-seamer and what was a four-seamer. But
Yeah,
he had
it's
his
tough.
share of 93s and 94s. So
I
So we
try
got-
to look at that stuff too, but like some ballparks are equipped with better,
yeah,
you know, TrackMan stuff than others. It's really hard, and you can kind of like mess with your own analysis when you are looking at, because they'll
Yeah,
go
you
to a
can.
road park and pitch, and it's like I don't know. It'd be nice if like someone on the ground there would just tell us every day, okay, this is being, they have like all the equipment at this park, and we're getting real readings here. And so some of the beat writers try to do that, but I
Yeah.
don't blame them for not making it their primary job.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, because I mean, with Montgomery, if Flaherty is, even if he's not an ace, if he's just a good pitcher, and then Montgomery, I like Matz too, honestly. I mean, you know, but then you're talking about a three if he can stay healthy. You know, it's the pitching could be there. I don't want to say that I'm more optimistic about it than I am other teams. It's just because I follow the Cardinals. But to give it my top five, just to kind of finish out that thing, I would go Braves. Then I'd go Mets and Padres, although I'm mostly sketchy on the Padres. And I think in my mind now I've got the Cardinals up to 4, somewhat based on what we're seeing from the outfield. Not because of Jordan Walker, but I mean, just they've got so much offensive depth now. If Carlson is your 4th outfielder and Burleson is getting kicked down to AAA, you're doing something right. I mean, I really have a lot of faith in Nootbaar. I think O'Neill, if he can just stay healthy, is perfectly productive. You've got 3 guys that can play center field at maybe an average level. I do think that Goldschmidt and Arenado will drop back a little bit, but they'll just drop back to their normal, really good selves. So, and then I think Tommy Edman's going to be the best defensive player in the National League. So when you start talking about that, I mean, it's really, and then, you know, like even though it's a quote balanced schedule, the Dodgers still have to play the Padres and the D-backs, you know, and the Braves still have to play the Mets and the Phillies while we're playing what could be a 500 team in the Brewers and the Cubs and below. So, you know, the Cardinals have a chance to rack up a few wins that the other contenders might not be able to do. So, yeah, I'll go 4th with them. And then I forgot who I've left off, but the Dodgers are right there. Dodgers are right there with the Cardinals. That could go either way. And that's like 93 wins, 94 wins to me. So that's where I've got those. And then Phillies and I guess that would take us to 6. You know, Phillies right
Above
there
and
is 6 at like 88 to 90 wins. So maybe 86 wins, somewhere in that range.
Things could go real wrong for the Phillies.
Yeah, they could.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the National League. I've got to ask you, Drew, while we've got you, we're running up on an hour, so we'll just make this one fast. Jordan Walker, man, what have you seen? What do you think?
Man, I get asked about him a lot just from friends.
Yeah.
Like, is this guy a monster? And like, yeah, I think he
Yeah.
is. I worry about getting too hyped on him. Like, I just want him to be able to do his thing.
Right.
And I was so excited for Oscar Taveras. And when he died at such a young age, I think that set back the Cardinals' offensive plan for like a decade.
Yeah.
To have this like cost controlled middle of the order hitter. And so I like my heart is broken still from that. It's sad. Like I'm just an emotional person when for some reason, like I'm 36 years old and I'm still my daily mood is dictated by what the Cardinals are doing, which is kind of sad, I guess. But you know, we're just living on a rock floating through space. So what else are you gonna do? I This is a long way to say that I think that Jordan Walker shows tremendous potential, and I think he should actually be on the opening day roster. And I mean, I don't know. I've seen everything that I wanted to see. I think he's going to be
Yeah.
their starting right fielder, if not DH, for the next 15 years. And they should try to sign him to a contract like some teams have done recently, like, hold the opening day roster thing kind of over his head in negotiations if you want to, and be like, sign this $145 million deal or whatever, and we'll put a bunch of options on it. And we'll make it team friend or player friendly at the end for you, but like let's get you in here and let's make you part of this franchise for the long term.
Yeah,
I think it's worth exploring.
I'm with you. I've seen enough. Every
Yeah.
box I needed him to check, he checked it off within a couple of hours. It felt like, yeah. Someone asked me this weekend when I was at a conference. They're like, "So what do you think?" And I'm like, I really hate to bring up Pujols, but at some point, this
Wow,
isn't
yeah.
Billy Carlson. This isn't Colby Rasmus. I know. I'm sorry, but we haven't seen this. I'm not saying he will. I'm not saying he's going to Pujols, right? Because only Pujols is Pujols. I mean, that's just
Mhm.
that's
Right, like once,
yeah.
yeah.
But could he be? Is he going to be better than Dylan Carlson was his rookie year? Yeah, I think so. Is he going to be better than Colby Rasmus was? Yeah.
I get what people are saying when they bring that up, just because, like, is he going to be a once in a generation talent?
Yeah.
Like, who can say? That's an impossible
Yeah, I'm
thing to
definitely not
say.
saying that yet, but yeah.
But like, as far as like the hype, it's above. I have been trying not to say this, but because I think, like you brought up Oscar Tavares,
Yeah.
I don't want to like make that compare, but this is the most excited I've been since OT. And I think because of the tragedy that happened around that, it like I don't want to get my hopes up, even though
Same.
that is that was a terrible tragedy that happened, and you can't possibly anticipate that happening again, but like it's like hard when like something like that happens, and it's like I don't want to. You never know what can happen in this world. So it's like,
I agree with you, Heather. Like, mess with my baseball brain. Like, it's not like he would just, he failed in the
yeah,
baseball, like he was just a bust, or he didn't meet expectations. Like, it changed my, I don't know, my heart and my brain toward baseball. Like, when it comes to the Cardinals, like, it hurt my
yeah.
heart so much, and it hurt their offensive plan so much that it's
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
I don't want to even think about Jordan Walker until I see him at Busch Stadium. And I'm going to be real excited when that, and Tink Hence too is like very
Yeah.
important to me
I
personally.
will say that that trio of Hentz, Wynn, and
Mm.
Walker is extremely exciting. Like, especially their personalities, if you see like them in
Yeah.
interacting with like the media and all that sort of stuff. Walker especially,
Yeah, he's incredible.
just charisma, I'm like, this guy could be he has to back it up with his play, but he could be something very special. That combination of charisma and talent, and just being a representative of a type of player, being like an African American player that we
Yeah.
don't see that as often as I think we should, in the league. I think that could just be an incredible incredible player to
Man,
watch. I'm
they
so
nailed that
excited. I'm
that
trying to
COVID
tamper it
draft.
down, and this is tampered
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
This is
That
tamped
draft in
down.
2020 though, like, so it was 5 rounds. It was the COVID draft where
Mhm.
it was a lot of college players, honestly. Like, it was kind of a throwaway draft for, I think, some organizations. But I mean, Jordan Walker was picked 21st overall Mason Wynn was 54th. Tink Hentz was 63rd. Alec Burleson was 70th. And then you've got Levi Prater, Ian Bedell, LJ Jones. Like, that's an incredible hit rate. And hey, these guys
Yeah.
haven't shown anything in the majors yet, but
Right.
for what I think they can be for this franchise, like, hats off to Randy Flores and Michael Gersh and Mozeliak, whoever was running that draft, because no other organization hit that draft as well as the Cardinals did.
One thing I want to say about the Walker's spring training is I do feel like there's a little bit of hindsight stuff going on with Dylan Carlson, because I don't think he's as good of a prospect. I think he's a better prospect than Dylan Carlson was, to be clear. But the way we were talking about Dylan Carlson in 2020 was kind of close to this. And I looked at his spring training stats. He had a 313 average, 450 on base percentage, 460 slugging. And everybody was saying we need to absolutely start him on opening day. We need to start him on opening day. And I worry a little bit if it wouldn't just be a little bit better if we let him dominate in AAA, let Dylan Carlson, because he would be the odd man out probably, get some playing time, wait for somebody to get injured, because like between Tyler O'Neill, to some extent Carlson, I mean, somebody's going to get injured or somebody's going to underperform. And I don't know. I feel like you're kind of putting yourself into a tough situation if he makes the team and he struggles like most 21-year-old will struggle, because the major leagues is very hard and mostly faced probably not major league quality pitchers, or he's faced major league quality pitchers who are still working on their stuff.
Yeah.
And we all know spring training stats can't be trusted. And there's not much of a case for him to make the team aside from spring training stats, to be honest, because his performance in play was not as good as people are making it out to be. Springfield is a huge hitter's park. He had a 128 weighted runs created plus. I don't think of that and think he should skip, because Carlson and Oscar Tavares both had considerably better lines in AA when they played. So I don't know. I'm a little hesitant to have him make the team just because you got three guys.
They don't really need him, I mean, if they could use that as an excuse to say, we have our outfield. We obviously have a third baseman. We have I guess a DH in Yepez. Or we want to cycle some other players through that. They have an excuse to say he should go back to AAA, but I think he's done enough to where I don't know.
You're forgetting about Gorman, by the way. Right now, he's slated as the DH. There's just too many people to play, and I feel like once you call him up, until somebody gets hurt, you're burying somebody who probably shouldn't be buried, so that they could still maintain their trade value, because some of these guys are going to be traded because you have to.
Yeah.
Guys.
You talk about Burleson in that draft. I mean, Burleson is as good a prospect as Stephen Piscotty was, and some of those other guys.
Yeah.
And we're basically talking about burying Alec Burleson and probably not wrecking his trade value because of his body and his defense stuff. Not a huge trade value, but I mean, that guy's going to hit. He's going to.
Dude, yeah. His righty lefty splits, he rakes everybody.
Yeah.
He's a really talented, competent hitter that I agree. It's kind of tough. He flies under the radar because there's not really a spot for him that's very obvious for this organization moving forward. Maybe it'll open up, but he's an obvious trade piece if they need to go get a top flight starter.
I do think you might in his trade value though. If so let's say he has a first 3 months or whatever as a fourth-ish outfielder, and he's got a 130 work or something, as opposed to somebody who's in AAA. Because we already know he can kill AAA. I don't think he's going to improve his trade value at all by going to AAA, especially as a questionable defender. Although I wonder if that's a little. I don't think he's Yepez out there. I think he's much better than Yepez.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah,
which should help a lot. I wonder if Yepez is more of a trade target, or not target, potential trade piece.
I think they tried to trade. I think they tried to trade him in the offseason. I mean, going back to what we're talking about with Murphy and some of those other deals, I think they were actively shopping Yepez. They just couldn't get Toronto, or I never really thought Yepez was a good target for the A's. I didn't see that being very likely, but
I think the teams.
He's a complete zero deal, so that's
that's it. And it's pretty clear that you can tell by the free agent market, teams aren't really valuing those first base DH types they used to even 5 years ago. You got to play a little defense. You got to bring something else to the table other than like raw power. And like Burleson does, because he can get on base and he hits righties and lefties. And but I don't know if Yepez is he kind of fits that mold of a typical like first base DH type that used to get big contracts like 10 years ago, but doesn't really happen
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, hey, we've already gone over an hour, and this has been a great conversation. And Drew, we're definitely going to have you back, man. We love to have you on, and love that you're a fan of the site and been around forever, and a St. Louis guy, and just a natural fit for these conversations. So, thanks again for coming on, and yeah, we'll be watching your stuff closely, and really appreciate your insight today.
Thanks for having me. You guys again made me more optimistic about the Cardinals pitching situation. I think you might be wrong, but I hope you're right.
I think that's what we are. We are optimistic and often wrong. That's
We might be wrong, but we might be right.
Oh my gosh, it's like my future epitaph.
Yeah.
Optimistic and often wrong. Here lies
wrong.
Heather Simon.
Yeah. Well, hey, from Drew and Heather and for Gabe, it was so glad to have you guys with us, and we will be back in 2 weeks for another podcast, talking about our expectations for the Cardinals as the season comes to an open, and hopefully we'll have all of our writers then, some kind of last minute stuff about the roster, and should be good. But for Drew and Heather and Gabe and everyone else at Viva Birdos, thanks for being with us, and we will see you next time we're on. Have a wonderful day.